Hey everybody, welcome to my channel. My name's Don, and in today's video I want to talk a little bit about rod repair or damage to fishing rods. I've been building rods and repairing fishing rods since I was 10, 12 years old. I started way back at a very early age because uh, I was constantly breaking things, and I was like everybody else. I was breaking my own fishing rods, just stupid things. Sometimes it had to do with the fish, but 90% of the time, I either stepped on the rod or I snagged up and pulled too hard and broke it. But uh, but I learned very quickly it's not that hard to repair them, and I did a lot of the repair work myself. And I talked to people older than me that had been doing it for a while and picked up some tips from them. And after a period of time, I actually became pretty proficient. Started collecting a lot of old blanks, a lot of broken parts, a lot of old guides, threads, epoxy. And by the time I was about 16 or 17, I was actually making a little bit of money from it. A lot of people were bringing me their rods, and I'd repair them or do the best I could with them. In some cases, I'd even rebuild the rods from scratch, just strip them down and start all over. Uh, there's a lot to be said for learning that skill set. It's not hard. I've taught dozens of people, maybe hundreds of people, how to build a fishing rod, but more importantly, how to repair the things that go wrong with your own fishing rod. One of the things that I see happen most often is people either break the tip or the little eyelet in the tip get pops out, and usually it pops out because they're using a bullet weight. They reel it up too far. It punches into the tip, what we call a tip top, and it just knocks out that little ring that's inside of the guide itself. When that happens, it's got to be replaced because it's all stainless steel, and over time, that line is going to wear a little groove in it, and it'll eventually become like a razor blade, and it'll slice your line. If you've ever lost a fish or your line, just suddenly broke, chances are it's because the line got damaged in a broken guide. But the tip tends to be the number one spot that people have the most problem with. And, I see more people make this mistake. They'll buy a tip. Maybe they buy it at Walmart or they order it online, but they get a tip for their rod. And the first thing they do is they find some super glue and they put super glue on the tip of their rod blank, slip the guide on, hold it in the position they want it in, and about a minute later it's on there for good. But here's the problem, folks. When you use super glue, it's not coming off. So the next time around, when you punch that inside out, or you do some damage to the guide and need to have it replaced, it's not coming off. The only way you're going to get it off of there is to cut it off with a hacksaw. And once you do that, you've just given up about an inch of your rod blank. So I would caution all of you, never use super glue on a guide, especially on a tip top. I've seen people do the same thing with guides. They'll break a guide and want to replace it. They'll use a little super glue and that'll hold the guide on there. Now, sometimes you can get those off. They're not quite as bad as the tip top. But again, I would highly recommend do not use super glue when trying to repair a fishing rod. Now, what's the right way to do it? Well, there's different substances out there, but the easiest way for me to explain it is if your wife has a glue gun, for example, maybe she's into crafts, but even if she's not, and you just pick up a glue stick somewhere, heat it up with a match with a lighter, smear a little bit on the rod tip, and then hold the guide and the rod tip near each other, heat both of them, and slide the rod tip on. Get it into position, and within about 30 seconds to a minute, it will harden. And once it hardens, trim off any excess, and you're good to go. And here's the good news. Something happens. If the tip loosens up, if you break the tip, if the insert pops out, all you have to do is heat it up again, and that tip top guide pops right off, and you can put another one on there. So I tell people all the time, carry a few extra, rod tips with you in your tackle, and always carry a glue stick and a cigarette lighter, because you never know when it's going to happen. And if you're out there and you're having a good time fishing, and it just happens to be your favorite rod that you punch the inside ring out, or the guide breaks, whatever the problem might be, you can repair it right there in a boat. It only takes you a couple of minutes. Some of the other issues that I see, and I get, you'd be surprised how many rods I get, even on a weekly basis. I don't really advertise a lot. I don't really promote my business a lot. I got so many other things that I'm doing that, again, it's like a lot of the things that I do, I never really seem to make any money at it, because half the time I either do it free or I don't charge a lot. So what little bit I make, I just pour back into buying more guides or buying more products. But the other thing that I see a lot, and this happens, it's only been maybe in the last 10 years that I've seen it occur like it has. If you go way back, if you go back into the 50s, 60s, 70s, most fishing rods had 4, 5, or 6 guides. In fact, if I remember right, back when I first started building fishing rods, as a general rule, they used to say for every foot of the fishing rod, there should be one guide. So, for example, if it was a 6-foot rod, you'd have 6 guides. 5-foot rod, 5 guides. 7-foot, seven guides. And I'm not sure that was real science, but that just seemed to be kind of the general thinking in the rod building business. And I can still remember back in those days, there was a lot of discussions about the resistance the guides provide, and how they'll kind of wear away your line, and how you've got to have the right guides. And this is where Fuji and some of the other companies came out with the vulcanized inserts, inserts made out of titanium or substances that were stronger than just fiberglass or plastic. And the reason was that our fishing lines became so much more sophisticated that over a period of time, just seesawing back and forth, they would cut a groove into the guide, and as a result, it could cut the line. So the lure manufacturers and the rod manufacturers specifically, over time, looked for ways to increase the value, increase the price of the fishing rod. And here's what's interesting is, even though 50 years ago they said that if you put too many guides on a rod, it would actually limit the distance you could cast. Suddenly, in the last 15, 20 years, now they're saying just the opposite. The more guides you have, the less resistance, and the farther you can cast. Well, it's all bullshit one way or the other. But what's happened is so many rods now, have forgotten the old rule of one guide per foot. And now, I mean, some of these rods is just ridiculous. Denali was one of my sponsors, and I use a lot of Denali fishing rods. And my favorite rod is one that they've built for years. It's a 710 flipping stick. And I just the other day I was talking to somebody about this, and I counted the guides, and I think there were 13 guides. 13 guides. Now this is basically an 8-foot rod, but 13 guides, that's a lot of guides. But here's the deal. They're not what I'd call good guides. And by that I mean it's not a reflection on Denali or any of the other companies that do this. What they've tried to do is not only add more guides, but make the guides lighter so that the rod didn't become heavier. That's always been, that's always been a goal of every rod manufacturer. And so what they've done is they've created these tiny little micro guides, and I mean tiny. And quite honestly, they don't have to be very big because they're just there to keep your line going straight. But when you have 13 of them on a fishing rod, and then you have a very small micro guide tip, something is going to break. And they break all the time. If I could, I mean, again, you'd be shocked how many rods I get every week. Customers bring in, they've got 1, 2, or 3 guides that have broken off. And the problem is simple. I mean, these guides have what they call a foot, but they have 1 foot coming down from the guide. All it takes is bending it back and forth a couple of times, and it snaps right off. There isn't too much you can do except take the old thread off, strip the thread, and put a new one on, rewrap it with thread, flex coat it. It's not a big deal. It's not a hard process, but it's hard to do on your own because you've got to have a machine that you can allow the rod to rotate for 6 or 8 hours while the flex coat dries, the 2-part epoxy. And not many people have that ability. But again, going back to the whole concept of repairing rods, it's a good business. It's a good way to make a couple extra dollars, and it's not hard to do. There's a company called Mudhole. They're actually up in Oviedo, Florida, not too far from Highlands County. I know some of the guys up there. They do a good job. They've been around 20 plus years. I don't know how long they've been here, but I know I've been a customer of theirs for years. And that's where I buy probably 80% of all my all the products that I might use in building rods or repairing rods. And you can order online. They've got a website. And you can set up a wholesale account if you have a business. But when you get into building rods is completely different than repairing rods because now you've got to have all the components. You've got to have the rod blanks. You've got to have the cork or foam handles, the reel seats, all the guides, all the threads, and there's a little more to it than you might expect. Threads, for example, come in different sizes: A, B, C, D, E. A being the finest thread, the thinnest. Usually we use A threads on fly rods. When you get into bait casting, spinning, usually we're into a C thread or a D thread. It's a little thicker, a little heavier, a little more forgiving. When you wrap a rod, you want to get those threads as tightly compressed together as possible so that once you've flex coated them, they almost look like they've been painted on as opposed to actually thread. But I can tell you, I've built some incredible fishing rods over the years. My hands have I've had some problems here in the last few years, so I don't build very many rods anymore. I have something called trigger finger, not from shooting guns. I don't think it has anything to do with guns. That's just what they call it. But my fingers lock up, and it doesn't really matter if I'm painting fishing lures, or if I'm pouring worms, or making jigs, or trying to wrap a rod. It's hard to do when your fingers lock up on you. I wrap my rods all by hand. I don't use any machines to wrap them. I've always done that. In fact, for the most part, I can sit there in my easy chair and I can wrap a rod while I'm watching TV, and I don't even have to look down at it. I've just done it for so long. But they do have machines that make it a lot easier to wrap. I just never got accustomed to using them. Uh, and of course, you've got to have a drying machine somewhere that you can use a little slower RPM to turn that rod so that once you put the two-part epoxy, the flex coat on it, it'll have a chance for that flex coat to dry evenly. Some of the rods that I've built, I think have been uh, pretty incredible. Um, Years ago, a good friend of mine, Bob Scranton, who I used to fish with quite a bit, he lived up in Avon Park, and he and I used to do a lot of wade fishing and over in the Gulf. And he brought me a 9 foot fly rod and asked me if I could build that into a spinning rod. And I said, well, yeah, I just have to strip it. And so I did. I took all the guides off. I took the handle, the reel seat, and I replaced everything. I put a cork handle, put a nice reel seat, spinning reel seat, foregrip, put all spinning guides on it, wrapped it, put his name on it. Probably got it done a couple of weeks later. I gave it to him. And the next time we went out to the Gulf to do some wade fishing, he took it along with him. And Bob was one of these guys. It's all he does, just saltwater. He loves saltwater. He'll make an exception to do some crappie fishing, and certain times of the year, but most of his fishing is saltwater, and he just loves it. He's really passionate about it. So on that particular day when he took that new rod, of course we had to go out first and catch bait, which I sometimes think he enjoyed catching bait more than he enjoyed fishing, but uh, he had his own chum, and he'd throw the chum out. He'd get a good chum line going, and pretty soon, here come the sardines, the greenies. He'd throw cast net, bring it back, just open it up, and I'd be in the back of the boat picking up all these fish, putting them in the live well. And after we'd catch 300 or 400 greenies, we'd be ready to go fish. And we'd pull into one of the islands over there and anchor, climb out of the boat, put our little fish basket, little net that we'd hang on our back, and fishing rod. And the bait basket was kind of cool. It was just kind of collapsible. Had a little float ring on the top you could pull it tight, and you'd fill that up with sardines or greenies, and we'd climb out of the boat, and we'd each start walking, and cast out, put a greenie on, cast out, and I'm telling you, we caught fish. Oh my God, we catch. There were days that we had to have caught over 100 sea trout, dozens of snook and reds, occasional flounders. I mean, we just catch everything. But that day, Bob took that new rod that I built for him, and I tell you, I was envious of how much fun he had with that rod. Now you have to imagine, this was probably 30 years ago. You couldn't buy a rod like this. I mean, it was a 9 foot spinning rod that was actually made out of a fly rod blank. And I'm guessing it was probably an 8 or 9 weight. But, you know, he was able to hook the greenie, because that's all we used. We didn't use floats or anything. And he'd hook the greenie on there, and he would lob it. He wouldn't really cast it. He would lob it. And he could throw it a mile because of the weight. But what was the amazing part of it was that once he got a fish, and we used circle hooks, so there was no hook set. You just kind of lift it up, and the circle hook would hook the fish. But the fun that he had fighting those fish on that 9 foot light action rod was just amazing. And I came back, I think the same day, and I dug out a couple of G. Loomis fly rod blanks and immediately went to work on building myself two G. Loomis GLX 9 foot, 9 weights that I still have today. And if I were to go fishing tomorrow, that's what I would take with me, 9 footers. I'm telling you, we caught reds, we caught snook, of course, sea trout, but we caught some monster reds, some big bull reds. And I mean, you'd get them in fairly close, and that rod would just bend over like a whip. And they couldn't break it. There was no way they were going to break it. But you couldn't really get the fish in close enough to even put a net under him. So we'd end up having to walk to shore and actually beach the fish. But it was really a lot of fun. And surprisingly, over the years, I probably built, I don't know, maybe a couple of hundred of those 9 foot rods. And there were a lot of guys that started using them just from knowing Bob and I. But it was probably the most original and unusual request for a fishing rod that I've ever had. And I've had companies, I've had different companies that have hired me to build rods for them where I could put the name of their company on them. And I think the most I ever built for one company was 25 rods. But that's a lot of rods when you start building exactly the same rod over and over and over. But, again, it was kind of another hobby that turned into a business. But the last thing, the final thing I want to say about rod building is it's changed a lot over the years. There's a lot of products out there and a lot of different types of ways to dress out the rod. One of the most popular in the last maybe 10 or 15 years is called marbling. If you've never seen it before, it's amazing. It's now being done in other hobbies as well. But the way it works is you wrap the rod in, I use a white thread. I suppose you could use any color. But I wrap all the guides. I do the just above the foregrip, I use white, just a base layer of white thread. And I use white thread on all the guides. And then I put down one coat of epoxy, flex coat. I let that dry. And then when I do the second coat, I put a coat of epoxy on a thin coat of epoxy on all the guides. And then I have a little tray where I mix certain colors, maybe a blue, a black, a white, and a light blue, or some combination. And then I take a toothpick, I stir those up real good. It's just a pigment that I add to a small amount of the epoxy. I take a toothpick, I just take a little bit of it and make a few dots or a few spots on the threads. And I do this with each of the different colors. Then I might take another toothpick and kind of streak the colors. And remember, the machine is turning the rod all this time. It's turning it very slow RPMs. And so the colors begin to meld together. And I got to tell you, when you're done, the colors are so astounding, so amazing. It's hard to even describe, but you can use any kind of color combination you want to come up with. I've done red, white, and blue, and just every kind of color. And the amazing thing about it is they're all one of a kind. There's no way that you can duplicate from one rod to the next, even if you're using the same colors, because the way that it blends together is going to be different. Another little trick you can use just to get a little bit more of a melding together is just use a heat gun or a hair blower which warms up the epoxy and forces it to kind of run into each other. And it makes for some really incredible designs. So anyway, for what it's worth, I don't do a whole lot anymore. I don't build a lot of rods anymore. I don't do a lot of rod repair, but there are guys out there that do, and it's a great hobby. It's a great small business, and if you've got, like a lot of guys will end up with 4 or 5 broken rods sitting in the corner in their garage. It's a waste because it's not hard to fix them. And, once you get them fixed, they're just like a brand new rod. So you might want to give it some thought. Listen, I appreciate your tuning in today. I hope you learned a little bit from this video, and I hope you found it to be interesting. If you did, please hit the like button. And, I'd like to see you become a part of the channel. So, leave any remarks you might have, and, subscribe to the channel. I appreciate it. I'm signing off for now. I'll be back later.